House File 40. Representative Burkle once again requiring fencing requirements. Representative Burkle, to your bill. I'd move House File 40.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House File 40 to be laid over. I'm introducing House File 40 here, and I just want to touch, of course, this touches on deer farming, but also I think, keep in mind the understanding that this is not just about deer farmers, but really farmers in the state and their right to farm. We all know that farmers and livestock producers work tirelessly, and we all know that deer farmers are no different. And we've recognized that fact actually in Minnesota statute. If you go to statute 17.452, where we actually recognize deer farming in subdivision 5 and subdivision 4. Raising farm survey is agricultural production and agricultural pursuit. So a lot of what we've done in the past couple of years has really inhibited where deer farmers stand as far as being recognized as agricultural producers. House File 40 would change some of the statutes currently pertaining to secondary fencing. And so in subdivision 4, the statute currently reads that farm survey fencing must ensure animals are confined in a manner designed to prevent escape, which is reasonable, and the fencing must be 8 feet tall and be designated to prevent entry or escape from the premises, which is reasonable. So my bill would strike the language regarding the physical contact between cervidae and free roaming cervidae, and that secondary fencing requirement. Also on lines 2.1 and 2.5 through 2.5, would strike the language that allows the harsh rule of revocation of a farmer's registration and the DNR's ability to seize and destroy animals on the facility. So if a deer farmer simply is follow the rule here and happens to have a deer escape, it doesn't even say the deer farm is infected or positive with CWD. The DNR can, if they want, go in and take that deer herd and destroy those healthy animals. If a cattle farmer doesn't follow a rule, they might pay a fine, but their cattle aren't taken away from them and destroyed. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to my testifiers, if I could, Mr. Chair.
Welcome again, Ms. Harkoff. Identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, members of the committee. Brenda Harkoff with the Minnesota Elk Breeders Association. I want to thank Representative Burkle for bringing House File 40 forward and for the opportunity to speak in support of this bill. As Executive Secretary of the Minnesota Elk Breeders Association, I've heard from nearly every member about their frustration with the 2023 requirement to add a physical barrier preventing contact between farmed and wild cervidae. This provision is the primary reason breeders are leaving the industry, with many breeders who have had decades of great compliance and surveillance now forced to exit the industry. While intended to prevent physical contact, the barrier's effectiveness is questionable. We've seen examples of closed, double-fenced herds that still detected CWD, and no other state mandates such a barrier on all the breeder farms. Many elk breeders are still struggling with this requirement, facing significant financial burdens due to the unfunded mandate. The Minnesota Department of Agriculture's limited grant assistance was helpful and appreciated, but it hasn't fully covered the costs. And adding the barrier can also be challenging due to fences that have been up for decades, where trees and brush have grown along the fence, making this an even more labor-intensive and expensive project. Age and physical limitations for some breeders have made the project unmanageable. While some breeders have successfully added barriers to their entire facility, others have had to sell some of their animals to lower their numbers and not use their outer ring pastures in order to comply. We also have concerns about the provision allowing the seizure and destruction of animals after more than one escape incident or uncorrected fence deficiencies. Destroying a breeder's livelihood in such cases could be seen as too harsh depending upon the situation. We all share the goal of eliminating CWD, but driving breeders out of business isn't the solution. There is still time to make this better for those who are still in the business. We ask for your support of House File 40. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Other testifiers, Tim Sprecht or Scott Fear or Lieutenant Colonel Gorecki. Welcome back. Identify yourselves and proceed.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair and members, sorry. My name is Tim Spreck. I'm here again representing the Minnesota Deer Farmers Association. House File 40 is just a pretty simple bill. What it does is it removes the reference to physical contact in statute. Physical contact is not what it sounds like. What it sounds like is that we're taking down all the fences, and that's not what we're up to. According to the DNR interpretation of what would be required to comply with this statute, the deer farmers were provided this particular pamphlet. What it has is 4 different options, most of which are extremely expensive, very hard to comply with, and also ambiguous in their nature. The most important thing about this is when we turn to the last page, and you should have this in your packet, the statements in this document did not have the force of law. This document is informational only and should not be interpreted as creating new criteria or requirements beyond what is already established in the relevant statutes and rules. Whether an individual facility complies with the relevant statutes and rules will be determined on a case-by-case basis. Nothing in this document should be considered legal advice. So here's what we've got. We've got a statute that was very hard to interpret. The DNR did what they did in interpreting it, provided this document to the deer farmers, and then told them, oh, by the way, if you do comply with this at great cost, it may not be good enough and it may fail. So what are we doing to the deer farmers here? We're putting them in a position that's untenable, where they can never comply, and as a result, we can drive them out of business. And currently, farmers are being fined. Mr. Fear is going to talk to you a little bit more additionally about that when he comes up. The bill also removes the revocation of license and destruction of animal language from statute. Escapes result from forces outside of the deer farmer's control, oftentimes weather-related, where they don't have any idea that an animal has escaped. And as a result of this, they could be fined, punitively damaged, and have their animals taken and destroyed. Both provisions in this bill are either impossible to comply with, needlessly costly, or result in the taking of property for a minor infraction. Mr. Chair, we thank Representative Burkle for taking this on and authoring this bill to help the cervid farmers of Minnesota, and we would appreciate support. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fear, identify yourself and let's hear your testimony.
Mr. Chair, committee members, my name is Scott Fear. I'm president of the Minnesota Deer Farmers. I'm here to testify on behalf or in support of this bill, 110%. These fencing provisions have been very devastating for our industry. As a president, I field calls daily. People are struggling financially, mentally, emotionally. How can we afford this fence? You know, if I talk on my behalf, I mean, the cheapest version of this fence, which I think is very ineffective, would be around $50,000 just for my farm. In excess of, if I
You say 15 or 50?
50. By the time you do labor, brush removal, whatnot, I have a very large farm. I understand some of the smaller farms maybe have been able to comply or maybe had fence up already. But for me, like I said, it'd be $50,000 minimum, upwards of $700,000, $800,000 on a business that seems to be going to the wayside. Especially with these regulations, like Mr. Spreck was mentioning there too, we got these 4 guidelines that they're good today, but yet it's on a case-by-case basis. So my farm might pass this year. If I get a different CO come inspect my farm next year, he may say, no, that it don't pass. So I just spent that $50,000, and next year it don't pass. You know, the goalposts keep moving on us. It's hard to get any concrete direction on what we're supposed to be doing, who's our contact person. We've had numerous people send in drawings of, you know, to the DNR on would this fence work? You know, apparently that goes to some fence committee in the DNR that I'm unaware of, nor are any of us a part of it either on this committee, but everyone has been denied. And at this time, I know there's at least 8 producers, including myself, that's in a notice of violation, a $500 fine, plus my $250 reinspection fee for something that I cannot afford to do. You know, we feel like our 8-foot high fence, we contain our animals. We're following state and federal guidelines. You know, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, but yet this double fence puts another dagger in our back. It feels like we're trying to be pushed out of business. And keep in mind, our businesses are all derived around marginal land or wasteland, where people have found ways to make a living with this land, myself included. You know, this has been devastating. It's kind of hard to talk about, to be honest, because it's very emotional for a lot of us and heartbreaking. This has been my dream for all my life, to do what I'm doing. And I've been doing it for 25 years, and I'm being kicked out based on over-regulations. And this one's the dagger, I tell you. This is what's getting most of us out of business. Keep in mind, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I don't remember the exact dates, but Minnesota had the most number of certified farms in America. We had, at that time, over $25 million revenue for our state. We're 10 years down the road now. Now, where could we be as a state as far as revenue? And on top of that, in combating CWD, finding the actual real cause of CWD, working with us deer farmers on finding a cure to CWD, or where it's coming from, how it's being transmitted. You know, and I think that's what a lot of this is with this double fence, is there's no data that supports 2 deer looking at each other through a fence or bumping noses will contract CWD. Nowhere in the world that I'm aware of that can happen. So what are we doing? I think as a state here, ourselves, myself included, working with the University of Minnesota, we're going to work on some, you know, with rodents, coons, other scavengers, squirrels, rabbits. How is CWD being spread? You know, because to me, it's not just deer to deer. As mentioned previously too, we have numerous farms in the country that have CWD infected pens, but yet the pens next to them are not being not contracted with CWD. So how can that be? They've been living together for 3, 4, 5 years, but one pen has it and one doesn't. You know, and they can touch nose to nose if they want. So where's it really coming from? I think we need to follow the science. I think we need to give this more time. And with that, I'll close with, I support this bill 100%, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Fear. Our last official testifier, at least by my record here, is Lieutenant Colonel Robert Gorecki. Sir, identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Gorecki, Assistant Director for the DNR Enforcement Division. I'll keep my comments brief. The DNR has concerns about changes proposed in this bill. This bill will not only remove the requirement to prevent physical contact between wild deer and farm deer, but removes the penalties for failing to follow cervid, fencing, and escape regulations. With this bill, wild deer and farm deer would be able to have nose-to-nose contact, again, what we're trying to prevent in the first place, and potentially increase the chances of transmission of CWD both directions. Removing the potential penalty of revocation in particular would leave little to no consequences to incentivize farmers to maintain their fences and prevent escapes. If there is a producer who flat out refuses to follow fencing guidelines, including fencing rules that have been in place for decades, neither the Board of Animal Health nor the DNR could take action against their herd registrations or take any serious actions against the producer to ensure compliance. This bill would substantially negate the purpose of all farm deer regulations, since the consequences for noncompliance would be limited to monetary penalties, which a noncompliant farmer would keep paying without fixing underlying violations. If farmers don't feel the need to fix underlying violations, this also increases opportunities for the spread of CWD. Overall, this bill would increase the likelihood of CWD spread. It should be noted, we're only out of white-tailed deer farms. There's only 10 farms that are not in compliance with the regulations currently. And I'll stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. Chair Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Gorecki. When you go visit a farm, do you find outside the fence just a path in some cases where wild deer are going back and forth along the perimeter?
Mr.
Lieutenant
Chair-
Colonel?
Mr. Chair, Representative Hanson, yes, that is very common at these facilities.
And Mr.
Chair Hansen.
And Mr. Gurecki, when, prior to this law being passed a couple years ago, seemed like every fall there were deer that were harvested with ear tags in them. And, we knew that there are no naturally occurring ear tags in wild deer. Since the passage of this law, have there been any deer harvested in Minnesota with ear tags in them?
Lieutenant Colonel?
Mr. Chair, Representative Hanson, yes, there has. It should be noted, since 2023, escapes have been drastically down. We only had 3 in 2023 and 2 in 2024, I believe.
Chair Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with those ear tag deer, was that a good indicator to find out where there had been a flaw in the fence?
Mr.
Lieutenant
Chair-
Colonel?
Mr. Chair, Representative Hanson, yes, in fact, most of those deer are unreported until they're harvested by a farmer. Excuse me.
Lieutenant Colonel, I have one quick question. I've heard that you had put out, or DNR had put out kind of the suggestions for fences. Is there a standard fence that the DNR approves and says, yes, if you do this, you will be approved? Is there some kind of a standardized suggestion for deer farmers?
Mr. Chair, no, there is not. It is a case-by-case basis. The reason for that is every farm has a different topography, landscape situation, so they're handled on a case-by-case basis. The guidelines that the DNR provided are just suggestions that will, in most cases, get people to be compliant with the current regulations. However, they're encouraged to submit suggestions or proposals to the DNR, to our wildlife biologists, who will review them, approve those changes and modifications if they're appropriate to prevent physical contact, or offer suggestions on how to alter their proposal and still meet the need for the physical contact regulations prohibition.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Representative Agbadje.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for the DNR again. You said that there's only 10 farms right now that are out of compliance, so are you working with those farms to get them back into compliance, and how is that process going?
Lieutenant Colonel?
Mr. Chair, Representative, yes, we continue to work with them. We're continuing to encourage them to become compliant. Some are choosing just not to do anything and wait out the federal litigation that's currently ongoing. Other than that, we can continue to encourage them to follow state regulations at this time.
Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. I think it's important to note that, at least some of them are trying to get into compliance. And then I think, as you were saying, it sounds as if this law that we recently passed is sort of working towards that effort to slow down the transmission of CWD. So I would think that this bill might be a little bit premature in kind of stopping a process that we are actually wanting to make sure that we have a healthier deer herd here in Minnesota. So thank you.
Comment, Representative Burke. Mr. Fear.
Mr. Chair, committee members, I find that to be false, that there's not enough data or not enough time to support her question that we think we're slowing down CWD. We don't know that. Nobody knows that. I think there's a double standard here. Us as producers, we put up our fence to keep our animal confined, just like a hog producer, cattle producer, any other animal. If we're so worried about the wild deer getting CWD from our CWD, we are certified clean herds by federal regulation. We test all of our deer when they die. I've raised deer for 25 years, had hundreds of deer die, never had one positive, nor will I probably ever. And I will go on record saying that. Another comment on the path along the fence line that was made before. That could be true. It could be deer, but yet we've also done with the University of Minnesota. We did a camera study here. One summer or 2 summers ago now. I think we compiled it was either 5 to 7 years worth of surveillance with hundreds of cameras, and the report came back that it was either 5 or 7 incidental contacts. That could be just looking at each other through the fence. So we're not talking about a major, like herds of deer walking along our fence lines, touching noses. I mean, it's actually kind of rare. And the cost, I guess the cost, if we're so worried about the wild deer touching our clean USDA certified herds, why does the producer have to pay for that cost? To me, it feels like a double. There should be, wouldn't the state or the DNR cover that cost? We're doing our job that we've been doing all along, and now we're throwing this up against us as well. It just feels like a dagger financially to get rid of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fear. Any closing comments, Representative Burkle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just say that, we've always, the saying, good fences make good neighbors. Where I come from, sometimes those costs are split. And in this case, I would say, and I believe in the Senate, a similar bill was heard, and there was an amendment added to have the state pay for the secondary fencing. But as things stand, the current statute is just unjust, and frankly, it's a regulatory taking of these farms' livelihoods. And I think this legislation begins the process of fixing the issue and allows a legal farm enterprise to continue to operate. And I'll refer you once again to 17.452, which says that these are actually agricultural animals. Farm cervidae are livestock and are not wild animals. I'm quoting that. So with that, members, there's a need to way to figure this out, and we can continue to work with deer farmers and all farmers in general. And this is what our House Ag Committee should really be about. So I'm going to leave it there and thank the committee for the opportunity to expose this threat to our legislatively legal farming operations in this state. And that's under statute. And thank you for hearing the bill, and thank you for laying it over.
With that, we'll lay over House File 40. Thanks, Representative Burkle.